How would you define Russia in just one word? Some might say cold, others Putin, or even vodka. But the truth is that defining the largest country in the world with its rich culture and ancient history is not easy. That's why we at the Bellamundo channel have prepared an incredible journey through 30 little-known facts about Russia. So get ready and subscribe to the channel because our journey starts now. Make sure you pack your warm clothes, because we're going straight to Oymyakon, simply the city that holds the title of being the coldest in the world. For those who don't know, the city is located in the center of the country, in the Siberian region. In 1926, the city's thermometers recorded a freezing temperature of -71.2 degrees, a temperature that to this day has not been recorded in any other city in the world. Since then, no other permanently inhabited place has recorded such low temperatures. This makes Oymyakon the coldest city on the planet, and its almost 500 residents real heroes. Living in such a place is not for everyone, and requires a lot of courage and willpower. It's 9 months of winter with temperatures of around -50 degrees Celsius. Just thinking about it makes me shiver. Thankfully, Russia is very large and has other cities that are at least a little warmer. In fact, Russians can be proud to live in the largest country in the world. It covers more than 17 million square kilometers, which is equivalent to approximately 11% of the planet's surface. Just to prove that it really is that big, within Russia you could put 2 countries the size of Brazil, which is also one of the largest in the world. The curious thing is that even with all this size, Russia has a smaller population than many smaller countries. The United States, for example, which has a territory slightly larger than half that of Russia, has twice the population. And with all this size, Russia is also the champion when it comes to time zones. There are no less than 11 different time zones in the country, which means that when some Russians are awake, others are practically in their pajamas. And Russia could be even bigger than it is today, because until 1866, Alaska belonged to the Russians. The entire territory of the largest state in the United States belonged to the Kingdom of Russia and was called Russian America. But the Russians already had a lot of land, or rather a lot of ice, to worry about, and they didn't want to bother with yet another frozen region. For this reason, Tsar Alexander II decided to sell the territory to the United States. At the time, the price was $7.2 million, which can be considered a real bargain, especially after the discovery of large oil reserves in the region. But when they bought it, the Americans weren't very happy, and many said that even though they had paid cheaply, they had only bought a large fridge that would serve no purpose. It seems they were wrong, and badly. At that time, the relationship between the United States and Russia was apparently quite different from what it is today. After Russia was transformed into the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or simply the Soviet Union, Russians and Americans became rivals worse than cats and dogs. For decades, the 2 countries fought to show the world who was the best. Even with the end of the Cold War and the Soviet Union, the relationship never went back to the way it was. And even today, Russia and the United States continue their disagreements. If we were to relate it to our daily lives, I would say that the 2 countries are like those neighbors who compete to see who has the nicest house, the best car, the bravest dog, and so on. And that really is a good analogy, because although many people don't know it, Russia and the United States are very close neighbors. Russian territory is separated from Alaska by the Bering Strait, which is 83 kilometers long at its narrowest point. But in the middle of the strait there are 2 islands, one called Diomedes Major, which belongs to Russia, and the other called Diomedes Minor, which belongs to the United States. The 2 islands are only 4 kilometers apart, which makes Russia and the United States very close neighbors. During the Cold War, this border became known as the Ice Curtain. If I had to describe this relationship, I would say that Russia and the United States are so close geographically and so far apart in almost every other respect. One of these differences is how beer is considered in both countries. While in the United States, as in practically every country in the world, beer is considered an alcoholic beverage and is only sold to adults. In Russia, until recently, beer was considered a food. In fact, until 2011, the country's law only considered alcoholic beverages with an alcohol content above 10%. Anything below that percentage was considered food, and therefore sold anywhere without any restrictions. But today, this is just one of the many curiosities about Russia's past, since the government decided to change the classification in 2011 as a way of trying to combat alcoholism, which is one of Russia's biggest problems. The problem is so serious that alcohol consumption is said to be one of the reasons why Russia has around 11 million more women than men. If you can't find the connection between drinking and having too many women, I'll explain. On average, women in Russia live to be 74, while men live to be 66. One of the reasons for this difference is precisely the amount of drinking that Russians do. In addition to the wars, traffic accidents, and heart problems that already leave a lot of women in the country, some of Russia's men still give a helping hand to the imbalance. A study of more than 150,000 men, published in the British newspaper The Guardian, found that those who drink vodka frequently have a 35% higher risk of dying before the age of 55. Those who stay alive should be grateful, because living in a country with 11 million more Russian women than Russians can't be all bad. But if you're thinking that it's only Russian men who have a worrying addiction, just wait until I show you what happens to some of Russia's bears. As absurd as it may sound, bears in the Krenetsky Reserve in Russia are addicted to sniffing kerosene. In reality, they are addicted to sniffing jet fuel and gasoline. The problem began when the bears discovered the gallons of fuel used by the reserve's employees to fuel helicopters and generators. A few years ago, a photographer spent a season in the reserve and recorded how the animals played with the jerry cans and sniffed the fuel before falling over backwards. And to close this topic on a high note, and also so that the Russians don't fight me, let me tell you what the most consumed drink in the country is. I'll tell you right away that it's not vodka, and you'll be surprised. Although the world's most famous tea drinkers are the British, the Russians are no slouches. On average, each person drinks between 5 and 10 teas a day. The preferred flavor is black tea sweetened with sugar, but this habit is gradually changing, and today, green tea or even black tea without sugar are gaining more and more consumers. The habit of drinking tea is totally linked to the country's climate. I think you'll agree with me that there's nothing better than a hot cup of tea to ward off the bitter cold in Russia. In addition to tea, it takes a lot of creativity to beat the low temperatures and still find a way to have fun. But the Russians are masters at this and have come up with ways to pass the time. One of them is playing chess, a sport in which the country has always had great competitors. But there are also more extreme ones, such as ice hockey and helicopter golf. No, you didn't hear wrong. Although it's not a popular sport practiced by many people, in Russia, a group of people, or rather crazy people, practice a very different kind of golf. The unusual images of the sport have gone viral around the world, and in them we can see how low the helicopter has to fly in order for the player to be able to hit the ball with a giant club. If you've been watching our recent videos, you've probably seen some very different sports, such as hurling in Ireland and polo with elephants in Nepal. But this one, I'd say, beats them all when it comes to innovation. And if you think you don't have the courage to get on a helicopter to play golf, don't worry. No one will call you a coward. But if you try to protect your ears before the temperatures drop below -20 degrees, I can't guarantee anything. The famous Russian winter hat, the Ushanka, is known for its ear flaps that can be lowered to protect against extreme cold. However, there is a curious cultural tradition among Russians, who consider it an act of cowardice to lower the Ushanka's ear flaps when the thermometers are above -20 degrees. This practice dates back to military times, when Russian soldiers demonstrated their resistance to the cold by keeping their ear flaps up until the cold became unbearable. Today, this tradition persists as a symbol of bravery and resistance to the harsh winter. In Russian cities, it is common to see people wearing the Ushanka with the flaps up, even when temperatures are well below zero, as a show of strength and endurance. To me, it's really an act of great courage, but it's nothing like the bravery that the Russians, especially the inhabitants of St. Petersburg, showed in the Second World War. Everyone knows that a certain mustachioed German wanted to succeed where Napoleon had failed, that is, to conquer Russia. It's even said that he had the victory celebration all planned out. In 1941, German forces laid siege to the city of St. Petersburg, which at the time was called Leningrad. The siege lasted 900 days, and during this time the city was left without communication with the rest of the country, and without essential resources such as heating and food. Despite all the cold weather in Russia, the residents resisted. Thousands lost their lives, but they still didn't give up, and the certain mustachioed German had to retreat. Thanks to the resistance and the war efforts undertaken by the then Soviet Union, Russia was able to remain a diverse country, with many different ethnicities living on its territory. Although the typical stereotype of a Russian is that of people with white skin, blonde hair, and light eyes, there is a lot of diversity within the country. There are around 190 ethnic groups living throughout Russia, many with characteristics typical of Central Asian peoples. An example of this diversity is the Republic of Tatarstan, one of the country's 85 subdivisions, which has more than 3.5 million inhabitants, with its own language and traditions. As I've just mentioned tradition, it's impossible not to remember the traditional matryoshkas, which are those dolls, usually made of wood, that have another doll inside, which in turn has another inside, which, in turn, you get the idea, right? The most curious thing is that these dolls, so characteristic of Russia, may have their origins in Japan. According to some reports, at the end of the 19th century, a Russian craftsman called Vasily Zvozdochkin created the first matryoshka doll by adapting an idea from a Japanese doll. But it wasn't a simple copy. With the help of the painter Sergei Malutin, he created the first doll with elements typical of Russia. The first creation was a representation of a typical Russian peasant girl, wearing a headscarf and holding a rooster. Since then, these beautiful dolls have become a symbol of motherhood and fertility, as they represent a woman carrying several generations of children. And I'd like to see someone say, they're not Russian. If there is any doubt about the origin of the matryoshkas, the same cannot be said of Tetris. The classic electronic game that has delighted generations for decades was invented in Russia, and no one disputes that. In fact, it was invented in 1984, when the country was still part of the Soviet Union, but in the end it went down in history as a Russian invention. It was in the same year that engineer Alexei Pajitnov, a computer scientist at the Moscow Academy of Sciences, created the game as a way of testing the capabilities of Soviet computers. Without much pretension, he named the invention Tetris, a mixture of the Greek word tetra, which means four, and tennis, which was the inventor's favorite sport. He chose the word tetra because all the game pieces had 4 blocks. I played a lot of Tetris in my childhood, didn't you? If this video made you remember the good times of your childhood, it's definitely worth a like. So don't forget to give it a like before we continue our journey through the incredible curiosities of Russia. The next part of our journey will be by train, but not just any train in the world. We'll be boarding the fantastic Trans-Siberian Railway, which I'm sure you've heard of, but you can never go back too far. The Trans-Siberian Railway is the longest railroad line in the world, crossing the vast Russian territory from Moscow to Vladivostok. Opened in 1916, this impressive feat of engineering stretches for approximately 9,289 kilometers and crosses 8 time zones, connecting Russia's European West to East Asia. A complete journey on the Trans-Siberian takes around 7 days and offers passengers a unique insight into the country's geographical and cultural diversity. Passing through large cities, remote villages, dense forests, vast steppes, and majestic mountains. As well as being a vital route for transporting goods and passengers, the Trans-Siberian Railway is an icon of adventure and romance, inspiring writers, filmmakers, and travelers from all over the world. Traveling on the Trans-Siberian is an unforgettable experience that allows you to explore the vastness of Russia and gain a better understanding of life in the country's different regions. Leaving the rails and heading for the heights, let's now get to know the Skybridge, the scariest footbridge in the world. Get ready for an adrenaline rush at our next stop. Located in Sochi, in the south of Russia, the Skybridge is considered one of the scariest walkways in the world. This impressive suspension bridge stretches 439 meters over a deep valley in the Krasnaya Polyana region. At a height of 207 meters, the Skybridge offers spectacular views of the Caucasus Mountains and the Black Sea, but can also cause vertigo in visitors who venture across it. The bridge is made of steel and glass, allowing visitors to clearly see the abyss below their feet, which adds a good dose of adrenaline to the crossing. As well as walking across the bridge, adventurers can try the zip line that runs alongside the Skybridge, offering a thrilling descent and an even more unique perspective of the surrounding landscape. The Skybridge is not only a tourist attraction, but also a challenge for lovers of thrills and heights. From a viewpoint high above the valley, you can see the vastness of Russia, which spans 2 continents, bringing together the best of Europe and Asia. Approximately 70% of Russian territory is located in Asia, while 80% of the population lives in the European part. This uneven distribution creates a fascinating fusion of cultures, traditions, and influences. The European part of Russia, home to cities such as Moscow and St. Petersburg, is the economic and political heart of the country, with the most developed infrastructure and the highest population density. The vast expanse of Asia, known as Siberia, is rich in natural resources and known for its wild landscapes and extreme climate. This duality between Europe and Asia is reflected in Russia's cultural diversity, where Western and Eastern influences blend in a unique way. The coexistence of different ethnicities, religions, and traditions enriches the country's cultural life, making Russia a true melting pot. As well as Russia's vast territorial extension, it is home to a diversity of landscapes, but not all of them are recognized for their beauty. Lake Karachay, located in the Chelyabinsk region, is sadly famous for being the most radioactive lake in the world. During the Soviet era, the lake was used as a disposal site for radioactive waste from the Mayak nuclear weapons processing plant. As a result, the lake accumulated extremely high levels of radiation, making it deadly dangerous for any form of life. At some points, just an hour's exposure to the lakeshore can be enough to cause death from radiation. To mitigate the risks, the lake was partially filled in with concrete in the 1990s, but it still represents a dark legacy of the nuclear arms race. Lake Karachay is an extreme example of the environmental challenges faced by Russia due to its industrial and military past. However, alongside such horrors, Russia is also home to some of the most impressive and enduring fortifications in history, such as the largest continuously occupied medieval fortress in the world. If you haven't yet connected the name with the monument, don't worry. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You just need to refresh your memory. Russia is home to the Moscow Kremlin, the largest continuously occupied medieval fortress in the world. Located in the heart of the Russian capital, the Kremlin is an imposing citadel that houses important government institutions, including the official residence of the Russian president. The Kremlin's walls and towers date back to the 15th century, and were built by Italian architects, reflecting a unique architectural style that combines Russian and Renaissance elements. As well as being a political center, the Kremlin is a historical and cultural treasure trove, containing several cathedrals, palaces, and museums that preserve Russia's rich history. Strolling through the Kremlin is like taking a trip back in time, exploring centuries of Russian history. This fortress is not only a symbol of power, but also a testament to the resilience and continuity of the Russian nation. Just as the Kremlin holds historical treasures, Russia also boasts some of the world's most impressive natural wonders. Among them is Lake Baikal, the deepest lake on the planet, whose beauty and mystery attract visitors from all over. It is located in the region of Siberia and is considered the deepest lake in the world, reaching a maximum depth of 1,642 meters. In addition to its impressive depth, Baikal is also the oldest lake on the planet, some 25 million years old. This crystal-clear body of water contains approximately 20% of all the world's unfrozen fresh water, making it a true natural treasure. The lake is famous for its unique biodiversity, home to thousands of species of plants and animals, many of which cannot be found anywhere else. Among these species is the nerpa, the world's only freshwater seal. Baikal is revered not only for its natural beauty, but also for its ecological and cultural importance. In winter, the lake freezes over completely, creating a vast expanse of ice that attracts adventurers and photographers from all over the world. Like this lake, Russian forests represent a vital part of the global ecosystem. But now let's explore the vast expanse of Russian forests and their environmental importance. Russia is one of the richest countries in terms of natural resources, and its vast forests are a testament to this. The country is home to around 20% of the world's forests, covering approximately 815 million hectares. These forests play a crucial role in absorbing carbon dioxide, helping to mitigate the effects of climate change. The taiga, for example, the world's largest boreal forest, extends over much of Russia, which is home to an impressive diversity of flora and fauna, including emblematic species such as the Siberian tiger and the brown bear. And it's worth noting that Russian forests are not only important for global ecology, but also have great economic and cultural value. They provide timber, non-timber products, and are essential to the way of life of many indigenous communities. However, these forests face significant threats, including illegal logging and forest fires, which require ongoing conservation efforts. From the vast forests, we now move on to urban environmental challenges. Let's explore one of the most polluted cities in the world, also located in Russia, and understand the impacts of this pollution. Norilsk, located in northern Siberia, is often cited as one of the most polluted cities in the world. This industrial city is known for its nickel, copper, and palladium mining, activities that have caused enormous environmental degradation. The smelting of heavy metals releases large quantities of sulfur dioxide and other pollutants into the air, creating a toxic atmosphere that seriously affects the health of the inhabitants. Conditions in Norilsk are so severe that the vegetation around the city has been severely damaged, resulting in desolate and contaminated landscapes. The effects are indeed alarming, with high rates of respiratory diseases, cancer, and other health conditions related to exposure to pollutants. The city is practically isolated from the rest of the country, accessible only by air or river, which makes living conditions even more challenging for its residents. I don't recommend it, but if you want to go to Norilsk, you can. The same doesn't apply to all Russian cities, as some are secret and not even Russians can visit them without permission. During the Soviet era, Russia established several closed cities, or secret cities, that were unknown to the public and did not appear on any official maps. These cities were often centers of military research, nuclear weapons development, or other sensitive activities. A famous example is the city of Zheleznogorsk, created to produce plutonium for nuclear weapons. To this day, many of these cities continue to operate under strict security measures and remain inaccessible to most Russian and foreign citizens. Residents of these cities had access to special benefits, such as better living conditions and greater access to goods and services, in exchange for their cooperation and secrecy. Even after the collapse of the Soviet Union, some of these cities maintained their secret status due to the strategic importance of their activities. The culture of secrecy and isolation that surrounded these cities contributed to an air of mystery that persists to this day. Russia does indeed have many enigmas, but on the other hand, chemistry became less mysterious after a Russian scientist presented the result of years of study. The periodic table of the elements, one of the most fundamental tools in chemistry, was created by Russian scientist Dmitry Mendeleev in 1869. Mendeleev organized the known elements according to their chemical and physical properties, leaving blank spaces for elements that had not yet been discovered. His prediction that new elements would be found and fit perfectly into his table showed remarkable scientific foresight. Mendeleev's periodic table not only made chemistry easier to understand, but also revolutionized the way scientists viewed the structure of matter. The scientist's contribution to science is immense, and continues to influence the study of chemistry to this day. In recognition of his work, element number 101 was named Mendeleevium in his honor. The periodic table is a lasting testament to Mendeleev's ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. What is missing is a geographical periodic table to organize and facilitate the study of the countries that Russia borders. It's not easy to keep track of the names of so many countries, Russia holds the title of the country with the largest number of land borders in the world, sharing boundaries with 16 different countries. These include Norway, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, China, Mongolia, North Korea, and the unrecognized states of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. This extensive network of borders reflects the vastness of Russian territory and the geopolitical diversity of the region. Each border brings its own political, cultural, and economic complexities. Russia administers a series of treaties and agreements with these countries to regulate trade, security, and other aspects of bilateral relations. The diversity of neighbors also contributes to Russia's rich cultural tapestry, influenced by a variety of cultures and traditions along its borders. And if you noticed, I mentioned Poland and Lithuania among the countries bordering Russia, but at first glance at the map, it would seem that these countries are not Russia's neighbors. But if you look closely, you can see the enclave of Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad is a Russian enclave located between Poland and Lithuania, separated from the main territory of Russia. This region has a rich and complex history, having been part of Prussia and known as Königsberg until the end of the Second World War, when it was annexed by the Soviet Union. Kaliningrad plays a vital strategic role for Russia due to its location on the Baltic Sea, giving the country year-round access to navigable waters without the problem of frozen ports. The city is famous for its historic architecture, including the Königsberg Cathedral, and for being the birthplace of the famous philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kaliningrad is also an important center of fishing and industry, contributing significantly to the regional economy. In addition, the region is home to a large Russian military base, increasing its strategic importance in today's geopolitical landscape. From Kaliningrad, let's head back to the length and breadth of Russia and learn about a curious tradition that could save you a lot of misunderstanding if you ever decide to give flowers to a Russian. In Russia, there is a unique tradition when it comes to giving flowers. Flowers should always be given in odd numbers. This custom is deeply rooted in Russian culture and is strictly followed, especially on festive occasions such as birthdays, celebrations, and romantic dates. Odd numbers of flowers are considered signs of good luck and joy, while even numbers of flowers are traditionally reserved for funerals and mourning ceremonies, associating them with death and misfortune. This tradition may seem strange to those unfamiliar with it, but it is an important cultural detail that Russians observe very seriously. Therefore, when gifting someone in Russia, it is crucial to remember to choose a bouquet with an odd number of flowers to express good wishes and avoid any misunderstandings. If you've managed to please with the flowers, how about going one step further and inviting your romantic partner for a walk? If you want to make a good impression, a good tip is to go to one of Russia's most famous museums, but don't be surprised by the staff there. At the world-famous Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, cats play a very special role in protecting the valuable art collections. This tradition began in the 18th century, when Empress Elizabeth I decreed that cats be brought into the palace to combat rat infestation. Since then, the Hermitage cats have become a beloved part of the museum. Today, around 70 cats live there, taking care of the task of keeping rodents away from the precious artifacts. The Hermitage cats are so important that they have their own team of caretakers and a dedicated veterinarian. In addition, they are celebrated with a Hermitage Cats Day, held every spring, when the public can meet these hardworking felines. The cats have their own passports and are adopted by families when they retire from their jobs. What I don't know is whether cats are entitled to time off at the turn of the year, or rather, at the turn of the year. In Russia, the New Year is celebrated twice. Once on January 1st, according to the Gregorian calendar, and again on January 14th, according to the Julian calendar, which is known as the Old New Year, or New Old Year. This tradition has its roots in the calendar reform carried out by Peter the Great in the 18th century, when Russia adopted the Western calendar, but many popular and ecclesiastical traditions continue to follow the old calendar. The Old New Year celebration is a more relaxed occasion compared to the main event of January 1st. Russian families take advantage of this date to get together again, enjoy a festive meal, and sometimes even exchange gifts. For many, It's an opportunity to celebrate once again, extending the end-of-year festivities. With this curiosity that shows the true face of the Russian people, we end our journey through the curiosities of Russia. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget that we already have other trips scheduled here on the Bello Mundo channel. So subscribe, turn on notifications to reserve your seat, and see you on your next trip.